so here we are, as promised. I figured I would try to do my best to talk about my testimony, and so yeah, here we go. Okay, so James and I, we have been together for 17 years, and we met, we kind of met through a mutual friend through church, and on his 23rd birthday, I was like his blind date, and so yeah, anyway, speed things along, that was back in 2004, by the way, and anyhow, sorry, I just got distracted. My computer making a noise. I hate that. Okay, anyway, sorry. So yeah, and then shortly after we got married, James, he was in the Army, and shortly after that, we had to say goodbye because he was deployed a few months shortly after we got married. So we got married in September. So in January, he got deployed to Iraq. And in June, he came home for a 2-week R&R. And we ended up pregnant. So yeah, you know what we've been doing on the 2-week R&R. Okay, sorry. This is a Christian show. Anyway, so yes, we ended up pregnant, and he went back to Iraq, finished his tour, and then the end of December, he came home to a big round belly of a wife, and a few months after that, we had our firstborn, our daughter, Mariah, and excuse me, that was a very bittersweet day, and let me explain why it was a bittersweet day. Well, it was sweet because our daughter was born, and that was awesome. But the bitter part was we come to find out that she had some birth defects. And the birth defects were 2 chambers of the heart instead of 4. And she barely had a stomach. We come to find out a little later. She barely had a stomach, and she had no spleen, and she was heterotaxy, and she had an enlarged liver. And if you don't know what heterotaxy is, which you probably don't, that's basically when you're an embryo, you supposedly have your organs come out, rotate, come back in, and then your body seals up, and then you grow from there. Well, hers did that, but they didn't rotate. They just came back in. So basically everything inside was also backwards. And backwards or flipped around. And so so when she was born, they heard, of course, a big heart murmur, and they were really concerned about that. So then they did x-rays, and they're like, oh my gosh, this is like totally, different. And I remember James and the doctor came in, and they had this huge downcast look on their face that they looked so, sad and terrified. And I was like, okay, what's going on? And James tried telling me, he was, babe, remember, in our 20-week ultrasound, they were a little concerned, but we really couldn't see because, ultrasound pictures aren't that clear. And there was a little bit of concern, but not really. It's just, yeah. Anyway, he's like, we were kind of concerned about the heart. Well, now we're really concerned about the heart. And he couldn't really finish his sentence because he was really choked up. And so the doctor finished, and he's like, look, we're not all that educated about all this. We're going to send her to Eggleston Children's of Atlanta, and which, by the way, we were living 2 hours south of Atlanta at the time. Anyway, so that day, she was born, and we're all happy, and then we come to find out that she has, heart problems, and we don't even know if she's going to live the next 24 hours. We don't know what her deal could be. So, I'm in the hospital, my husband, my newborn daughter leaves, and my family, they have to go back to my apartment. And of course, they have to do what they have to do and stay there. And I'm, of course, a mess, crying my eyes out. And then the good news was my father-in-law, James's dad, lived only 20 minutes away from Children's in Atlanta. So we end up staying there with him. And Luckily, they did know a little bit of this birth defect, and they've seen something similar, but of course, each child is different. So they're like explaining to us how they could probably help her in the future by rerouting some things in her heart and stuff like that. Well, then later we come to find out that she could barely hold an ounce of milk or any fluid in her stomach because it was that tiny. So we had to, at 2 weeks old, we had to like reroute some things like with a tube, like put a little button on her abdomen and put a tube in through there to bypass her stomach and to feed her through that way. And so we had to go through that, and she was doing pretty good. And then later, like I think around a month or two later, she ended up having to have an open heart surgery, and she almost died on the table with that. But she didn't. She was pretty strong considering what was going through with her body. And then we had to do some other surgeries, and then some things didn't go well, and we had to go through some things, and she had to have PICC lines to help keep her, going, because that was the only way she could receive any kind of nutrients was through PICC line. And if you don't know what PICC line is, that's a big like IV thing in your arm or wherever they put it. So speed things along, she eventually started to get sick. Like her body just couldn't handle any of it anymore. She became jaundiced, very puffy and yellow and stuff like that. And she was just really weak and really sick after all of the surgeries and open heart surgery for that young, and going through everything that she was going through. At 4 months, the doctor said, "We have done everything that we possibly can do for this baby and for your child. We honestly think you should set up hospice care so you can take her home and just let her live the rest of her little life here with you guys. And we predict maybe a month or two, and that's probably it." Well, we took her home, and on three days later, she passed away. And even though I knew that this was her fate, it still, of course, hurts really bad. Really, really bad. And I think it's kind of normal, I guess, to go through like a lot of grief, like bitter grief and being angry. But I went personally, I think, really in that dark stage of depression and bitterness and anger and stuff like that. But at the same time, I still kind of like held on to God, only because I knew he held the answers. I was still angry at him, but I knew that I still needed to talk to him, because I was like the typical why? I think we all been there, done that sometime. Hey, I've been there, done that, got the t-shirt, burned the t-shirt, and I'm just joking. I don't know. Anyway, enough of that silliness. So yeah, I just didn't understand why God would allow a 9-month pregnancy to endure hardship for 4 months, and then seeing her basically decay in front of your eyes, and then you witness her first breath and you witness her last breath. That's what I had to go through. That's what I went through. And I was only 25 years old. So yeah, I just remember being very dark and bitter and angry, and speed things along. About 5 or 6 years after her passing, I was beginning to like lose hope, because it was been 5 to 6 years of not seeing any work of our labor, if you know what I mean. We didn't get pregnant, and so I remember going, God, I guess you just don't want me to become a mother. I guess you don't trust me, and then I started validating it, like, yeah, you're right. Why should I be a mom? I'm so insecure and selfish sometimes, you know, and I basically blatantly said, I give up hope. And then the next month later, we ended up pregnant, which was awesome. I was like, oh my gosh, fearful and excited because, you know, hey, we finally got pregnant. And two, we just, you know, a few years back had a horrific traumatic experience of having a baby, you know, so there was that little back of your mind fear. Well, so anyway, we come to find out that that baby number 2, was growing a cystic hygroma, which is a very rare development of a bubble behind the baby's neck. And the doctors were like, okay, so, you know, this is a big red flag. Either you're going to have a stillborn or a miscarriage, or you're going to have a very hefty special needs child, you know. And I was even asked, like, what would you like to do? And I'm going, I can't fathom any of this right now, like, you know. So I was like, oh my gosh, again, another situation, another traumatic, potential traumatic situation on my hands. And I was like, wait a second, God, I thought this was going to be my redemption baby. I thought this was going to be, you know, kind of like a healing thing for me. But no, it wasn't. In fact, we had an ultrasound appointment the day before Thanksgiving, and we saw on the monitor screen that there was no life there. We just saw a lifeless little baby. And the doctor at the time said, okay, do you want to go home and let this naturally happen, or do you want a D&C? And I said, I don't want to experience this because this is the holidays, like tomorrow's Thanksgiving. And she's like, okay, we'll schedule for a D&C later today. And so we went back home, and I was like, I remember thinking, okay, I'm glad I don't have to go through this. But again, why? What's the point of going through this? So we had the D&C later, and then I was like, now, okay, now I've got my hope back. There is hope. We can get pregnant, and let's try again. So we did try again. A few months later after that, we ended up pregnant with our third time around. And this time, everything was looking textbook, beautiful, perfect. Little wiggle worm, little guy or girl at the time, we didn't know. And so we go in, we have ultrasound, we see a 10-week baby, and the doctors were like thrilled. Everything was checking good. And they said, oh, this is looking really good. Let's send you to a specialist next week just to double check on everything, because they have better equipment and better eyes on things. And so we're like, yeah, sure, we've got this. Well, the next week after that, we went into our appointment, got on the ultrasound thing out, and we're looking at the screen, and there again, a lifeless baby, another lifeless picture on the screen. So, I mean, honestly, I know this is like really graphic, but I threw up whatever I had eaten that morning. I was like, oh my gosh, what just happened? Like a week ago, we saw the baby moving, happy, wonderful, and then nothing. Like, what the heck, you know? And yeah, I remember going, oh my gosh, what the heck? And I felt like someone just socked me in the stomach, and I threw up everything that morning. And then, yeah, so later that same day, we were back doing another D&C. And so I just was like, oh my goodness, you know, my relationship with God was not very good. I was very heartbroken, sad, just, you know, what the heck, you know. And I was, before all that, before the 2 miscarriages, I was actually warming up to God a little bit, and then that happened. And yeah, so stick around for part 2 of this testimony, and I will see you back here next week. All right, we're running out of time, and I also want to let you know, in a couple weeks, I think after this, we're going to be starting my devotional book, Little Things Matter, and I'll see you next time. In a couple weeks, I think after this, we're going to be starting my devotional book, Little Things Matter, and I'll see you next time.